Hello everybody, how's everybody doing?
Great. Well,
Last time we were together, we were working with our client, UMO. They asked us they wanted to bring in an online presence, move some of their curriculum to an online format, and we gave them some recommendations, and very well received. And they've come back and said, okay, we want to do that, but we also want to achieve accreditation. It's a high standard for our programs. We want to see that we are accredited. So we've spent the past couple of weeks looking at the standards and what's involved. I think we made a great choice looking at NACOL as the guideline for the standards. I want to go back and where we left off. We had three recommendations, but two really specific to courses and programs. We talked about the need to, as UMO moves to an online format, to pick general ed courses that lend itself to an online format that would work best. Clearly, organic chemistry would not do as well. Intro to sociology might be more appropriate. And we also looked at taking these traditional online courses, the traditional on-ground courses, and see if there was a way to have some kind of an online component of that. So again, there was a third one related to teaching that I'll come back to, but with those first two, I feel like that we really need to, as we meet with the president next week of UMO, address the need of looking at courses and programs and what are the standards. So Karen, I'm going to start with you and James. I know you looked at the standards at more of the program level. So can you talk a little bit about what you found and what we need to convey to the president next week?
okay. Well, I looked more or less at an overview of the standards for the online programs, and the program that's designed to provide states, districts, programs, and other organizations with a set of quality guidelines for leadership, instruction, content, support services, and evaluation. So in doing that, there are some structural standards that apply to the overall program, and that would be the foundation, more or less, of the standards. So in that would be its mission, its purpose, goals and objectives, and its underlying beliefs and philosophy. Its leadership, which is responsible for setting and meeting operational and strategic goals in support of the program's mission and vision statements. And then, of course, its governance, the role of the governing body, and how the relationship between the governing body and leadership work together to support the achievement of the mission. And then there's some things that are important within that framework, such as planning. Planning is a regular part of the program. It includes strategic planning as well as long range and operational planning. And to be effective, planning should be an ongoing process, and it should be evaluated. Then there's the organizational staff. They should be well trained and provided with appropriate levels of support, resources, feedback, and management. This should promote a better level of commitment on their part to the organization and the success of these goals. And then a quality online program has to have adequate financial and material resources in order to accomplish the mission of the organization. There should be appropriate policies in place to ensure that a student's ability to access the program is in place. And then lastly, in order to maintain integrity and accountability, leadership should provide regular feedback on the progress and achievement of those learning outcomes.
I think we're going to hear a lot about feedback throughout this process. So
Right.
absolutely.
Right.
James, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, and mine delved a little bit more into different categories, curriculum and course design, instruction, assessment of students, faculty, students, and also a little bit about the guidance that we provide to students and the organizational support that already been touched on a little bit too. But within the curriculum and course design, in order to meet accreditation standards, the courses and the curriculum have to have attainable educational goals. They have to provide quality instruction and materials and have the appropriate technology to support that. They have to be able to maintain rigor, and within that rigor, they have to be able to show that we are having critical thinking, problem solving, analysis, integration and synthesis abilities. And of course, we have to be able to meet any state or national standards and the assessments that are required in those standards as well. And because it's an online program, we've got to make sure that we don't violate copyright or fair use as well. So, and that's in the curriculum and course design. And instruction, instruction again is tied back to, as Karen mentioned, back to the mission and beliefs of the university, and that's tied to the student learning. That the instruction is supported by best practices and supported by research. That there's frequent student and teacher interaction, and that all the faculty are licensed or credentialed in the appropriate field. And then when we come to assessment of the students need to be able to monitor their own progression through the program. Instructors have to be able to monitor the students' progression. And the instructors need to be able to be adaptable to the different students that are involved in the learning experience, and to being able to change technology based on student needs. We have to have informative assessments that we can show where the students are, where they need to be, and that we're meeting that progression. And we have to be able to have measurable student goals so we can see that attainment is occurring. The faculty need to be able to have feedback and mentoring so that they understand whether they're doing a good job in the online environment or not, and mentoring in order to get them prepared to do that. We have to make sure that we have the technical support for the faculties and being able so that they can achieve the mission, and we have to have professional development, which you'll talk a little bit about too, I think. And for students, we need to be able to have an orientation for the students to make sure that they're ready to enter into that online environment, that they're prepared for technology. We have to make sure that we have administrative and organizational support available to the students and that they know how to access it. We have to be able to have a clear path of communication so the students know how to speak with the instructors, and the instructors have that pathway to them, since it's going to be remote. Timely feedback of assessment is very important in order to meet these standards. We have to be able to let the students know where they're at and do it in a timely manner. And then, of course, technical support for the students if they're having issues. And then, of course, guidance. They have to have access to advisors, and the advisors need to be well trained. And the advisors need to be able to understand what support and training that are available for the students so that they can relay them and point them in the right directions if there's issues. And then organizational support. We have to have the resources available to maintain a positive learning environment.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It all goes back to our previous discussion about online education. These are just standards that ensure that we offer the right, that we do it the right way.
Absolutely. One thing that I look forward to sharing with the president, I look forward to sharing with the faculty about these standards, and it relates to kind of what we looked at. Number one, a lot of these standards are very common. It's the same language that other accrediting bodies look at. So they're not having to reinvent the wheel, start over. If they've gone through the accreditation process before for traditional programs, a lot of this is going to look the same. Another thing too, and we look specifically at accreditation for looking at the standards for courses. So much of what is required at the programmatic level is very similar for the course level. Some of the things about feedback, issues about having the right training there was important. I want to look at a couple of things that stood out though that were a bit unique with online courses. Again, they asked you've got to have a syllabus, there's got to be contact information, you've got to talk about academic integrity. However, really important with online education is that the curriculum must include activities that build communication skills, information literacy, but a really interesting thing that I noticed, learning resources and materials to help students to succeed need to be made available to the student before the course starts. So if there are textbooks, if there's software, if there are browser plugins, they need to be made available beforehand. And there needs to be some kind of a prerequisite knowledge and skills assessment in the beginning to make sure the student's ready to move into this online course. So that will require some little more planning for the faculty. In terms of instructional design, one thing that I really saw repeatedly was build engagement. There needs to be student-instructor interactions. You mentioned that a lot. Opportunities to get feedback, but really meeting the needs of the students based on where they are. And in terms of the assessment, again, these are things that you could apply this to a traditional or online course, but there needs to be evaluation strategies, feedback's ongoing, feedback is timely. A student needs to know, here's where I am in the process, here's my progress. But also that it's really important with teachers in the online environment that they got a myriad of assessment tools and resources, quiz banks to really bring those going. Speaking of technology, Maggie, I want to turn to you. You looked at technology and some other aspects. What did you find specifically with the standards?
Yeah, so one of the things that popped out that was unique that we haven't quite covered, we talked about it in our first conversation, was learning management system. So there is some accrediting requirements that have to come with the LMS program. So a lot of those have to do with communication with the student, and there are certain benchmarks that have to be met with that system. So that will probably narrow down the options that we have available to us pretty significantly. I found it also very interesting along those lines that the technology requirements have to be put out at the beginning as well. So you just mentioned that, and that follows through into to the technology section again. So any kind of hardware requirements or software requirements need to be made known as soon as that information is out there for the student. One of the things that might pose a problem with one of our recommendations was to be accredited, there has to be a flexible schedule to accommodate different student calendar needs. So if we're talking about in-person things as part of this, we have to be aware and definitely read through and comb through that standard for the accreditation, a flexible calendar for accommodations there for those students. One of the things that's hit on a lot in this section is that content needs to be added throughout the course, so that student engagement part comes back in. There has to be new material, and it needs to be from a diverse group of sources. So websites and databases and videos, they really spend a lot of time talking about different kinds of technology that are available to students. So that's kind of the technology component of it. And I also looked through some of the assessment pieces as well, and I continued to mention that faculty and students both need to have opportunities to provide ongoing assessment about the course. It's not just like once at the beginning, once at the middle, and once at the end. It sounded like they wanted really frequent assessment and a lot of feedback on a weekly basis. Also with that piece is having support for the professors teaching the course. And they talk about professional development as a big aspect of that. And they talked about, one of the things that I found was really interesting was student well-being. So they talked about emotional and all sorts of support with that as well. And as well as a platform communication professional development. So they wanted the teachers to continue having support and continuing to develop their communication skills, as well as having 24/7 technical support if available. If that's not available, specific hours for their technical support. So that was some stuff that jumped out at me. And then as the course is established, the last thing was the periodic updating of the material. So as things change, as new information arises, continue to add that into the course and maybe eliminate some of the outdated material.
Good work. Some recurring themes, but also some things specific to online education. Another recommendation that we talked about, and I think if I ranked them, that's what definitely one of the first ones we're going to hear about. We've got to give faculty training. They've got to feel comfortable about this. This has got to be something they've got to work through their hesitations. And I know, Aaron, as a faculty member, you look specifically at quality teaching and for the faculty. Can you talk a little bit about what you found within the standards there?
Sure. A lot of the things that you guys have said about the program and the course are skills that teachers simply need to be retaught. They already know how to do it in a classroom, but now they have to figure out how do we do it in an online classroom. So the biggest thing here is to provide training that will give them the direction on how to be adaptable. Because you can't force people to change their ways, but you can give them the tools to try to figure out how to do it. So the university definitely needs to put forth some training initiatives I think the training could be in person with ability to have group conversations with other faculty members, but that it also could have an online component that they can work through at home. They need to have the access to computers and to internet while they're there so that they can walk through the elements that are being discussed by whoever is leading the training. I went through all of the standards and just came up with some basic ideas of what needed to be taught during that training session. I think that among them, some of the biggest ones are that we need to provide the information to teachers about websites that they can continually go back to and see what is happening in educational technology. We need to give them the access so that they can stay up to date on things, let them know where they can access that. We need to be able to give them the different guidelines that they have through whatever system the university decides to use. So you mentioned LMS systems. All of them operate a little bit differently, and we need to be able to tell them, here's how you turn in papers. Here's how you can convert what would have been a presentation into an online video. Here's how you can facilitate engagement through discussion boards. We need to be able to give them all of the tools necessary through that system and walk them through the LMS so that they can see how they can easily convert what they would do in a classroom over to the online system. Let them know about the technologies, things like YouTube, Screencast-O-Matic. How do you create those accounts? How do you use those accounts? We need to be able to give them the numbers in that training, as you were saying, to be able to contact people if they have technology issues. We also need to let them know those numbers so that students can contact and they can pass that information on to their students. Class interaction is very important and will be something that is encouraged when they learn about the LMS system. They really need to be told, focus on making sure that the student is involved rather than you take a backseat approach as a faculty member. With an online class, it's so easy to just sit back and think they can do their work and I leave it alone. You need to be just as engaged as you would be in a classroom setting. So you need to be participating in the discussion boards with them, giving them feedback on their assignments in a way that is going to be helpful to them so that they can perform better in future assignments, but also in a way that maintains their privacy. Privacy was a big thing that came up here. Teachers are going to need to understand all the rules and regulations that apply in a classroom still apply in an online classroom. So we need to re-educate them in this training about FERPA, how to follow it in an online classroom in particular, who you can and can't send emails to about people. We need to be able to also remind them of ADA guidelines. How do you follow disability guidelines in an online setting? What are the things that you can do there? And we also need to go through the copyright training, which is something that got mentioned as well in the program section, and let them know that it's okay to find ideas and websites and links and things that you want to share with your class, but there's a way that we have to go about doing it so that we're not infringing on copyright. And above all else, I wanted to highlight that the big thing from this standards section on teaching was that there was a comment that online learning should focus on student empowerment that came from the report. And I think that if we put that at the forefront of our teaching training and remind them that this is what we're trying to do, we're focusing on the student and getting them to get the same skills that they would get just in a different format, then I think we'll be in good shape.
Good deal. Well, great work, everyone. This is really exciting. I'm really excited for UMO. I think they're heading in the right direction. I think really emphasizing to the president this faculty component. I think the course and the programs, that the infrastructure is going to require some tweaking, getting the faculty and realizing what their concerns are and addressing it. A good training, a good mentoring, professional development program is going to work great. So let's all get some rest this weekend. We've got a big week next week with UMO. Again, great work, and that's all. Thanks.